Hey guys, my name's Brad. Welcome back to my wood shop. Today I thought we'd get into a little bit of the budget tool videos, specifically the WEN brand, W-E-N. I've been some debates and conversations over the years about these and whether they're good or not. So if you're interested in hearing about that, just stick around. So one of the unique things about WEN brand tools is, as far as I know, you don't find those in any big box store or anything like that. As far as I know, they're exclusively online. You know, you find them on retailers like Amazon and eBay and that kind of thing. And I've been in conversations over the years, seen a lot of forums about whether WEN brand tools are any good, whether they're worth the money. And I can tell you for the money, at least the ones I've used, are definitely worth the money. They're not pro grade tools, or by any means. And so what we're going to do today, I'm going to start from kind of my smaller ones and less used items, and I'm going to go over the pros and cons of those and show you some of the ones that I pick as my favorites. Okay, now first up, one of the things I'm going to show you is these 1, 2, 3 blocks, and I've featured these in a previous video before. And while they're not specific to woodworking, I do feel like they have their place in the woodworking shop, and mainly I use these for squares or setup. You can do that. But the main thing with these is they're a perfect 1 inch by 2 inch by 3 inch. And so it's perfectly square. You can set that up next to your table saw blade and get it 90 degrees. And that's mainly what I use these for. And for the cost of them, they're definitely worth the money. Okay, so next up, I've got this little WEN electric hand plane. I'm sure a lot of you have seen these particular types, and maybe not necessarily the WEN brand. I want to show you how this thing works. This is seems to be a really good one. I don't use it a heck of a lot, but the main thing I use it for is not necessarily getting something flat, but if it's got some uneven spots, it's good to take that and kind of level it down and get it out of your way. And I use it a lot, believe it or not, for wood turning. If I've got a piece that's kind of out of kilter, I'll run it across there and get it good and flat so I can mount my faceplate to that. And I do apologize, you're seeing a project over here that's kind of in the works. My part of this is done, but just kind of waiting on the final install on that, so you'll see that in the background. But anyway, getting back to this WEN electric hand plane, I just took a pass or two here, and we'll see how this thing works, but you can see some unevenness in here, what I'm talking about. We'll run that. Always make sure your tools stop before you lay them back down. But you can see in just a matter of minutes there that took what used to be kind of a rough piece of wood and kind of smoothed it out a little bit. But yeah, that may be something that you'd be interested in. Definitely takes some of the work out of like a old-fashioned hand plane. Those can be a bit of a struggle using them, and this is pretty easy. Okay, for our next item, I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory. Several years ago, and I do mean several, when I kind of first got into woodworking, I'd wanted a nail gun, a finished nailer to be exact, and I bought one at a flea market. It was close to $100. And of course, things have changed over the years and tools become more readily available. Anyway, I bought the WEN one here that shoots up to a 2-inch nail, and it also uses narrow crown staples. Those are quite handy. If you're not familiar with those, look those up. But I bought this one for around $20. This one works great, and I told you I'd give you some pros and cons. Shooting wise, it shoots great. If there were anything that I had any negatives on this particular one about, sometimes when you're pushing down and shooting, don't worry, I ain't got this hooked up. Sometimes this trigger likes to hang, and you can kind of see there, and it doesn't want to let back out, and so you kind of got to fiddle with it to get it going. And then the other thing, the nose of that, you can see the safety here, in my opinion, should be, I don't know, a little sharper. you know, don't get me wrong, a rounded edge would keep from scratching your work surface, but that also makes it to where if you're really close to an edge, you can kind of see there, it's kind of slipping off of there, and that's the downfall of that. So that's the only drawback. That's really just a minor gripe, but either way, for 20 bucks, that one's well worth it. And to kind of go along with that one, I bought an air stapler years ago when me and my wife were building our house. Main reason being I didn't want to be installing insulation with a hand type that you pop and everything, because I knew it's just going to kill our wrists. And so I figured it'd be worth the investment for an air stapler. And this one also works great. Don't really have any kind of cons to say about this one. It does use the standard, I think it's T50 staples, so you can go find those about anywhere, Walmart or anywhere. And this works great. Powerful, does everything you need it to. Doesn't take a lot of air. And as what I'm reading here, it'll shoot up to a 9/16 staple. So if that's something you're interested in, and as well all these others, I'll put some links in the description so you can check those out for yourself. So for my next item up here, some of you may know, if you've kept up with my channel at all, I do not only general woodworking, but I do wood turning too, and that's woodworking as well. It's just sort of a different type. Anyway, what I wanted to get into, when I first started doing wood turning, in my opinion, one of the first things that you need to buy is a good chuck. Now, the first one I ever bought was this one right here. This one is not a Win. I just wanted to show you the differences here. And what I absolutely hated about this particular one, you can see these holes here. If you're not familiar with this type, you have to use something similar to these little knobs or handles, and then you turn those, and depending on which way you turn them, you're closing the jaws or opening them. And you can see there, I dropped that one. But using those, I've got that set in. And this one has teeth inside of here. And what that does, that grabs a hold of your tendon or your mortise, depending on which way you cut it. And that is very inconvenient when you're trying to mount a bowl on here and you're trying to use two handles, moving those back and forth. It's very hard to get that centered on there. And so I kind of kept looking around, and I started to get a Nova. Don't get me wrong, Novas have good reviews. But being on a budget, I had to go with what I could afford, and that's where the Win came in, and I found this one on Amazon. So this is a one-handed operation. Uses this little key here, and you just twist, and then essentially it works like a drill chuck, because you're just twisting, it's opening it up. And this particular one, it's another one I can't think of any cons I have about it. Nothing negative. It's held strong. Anything I've ever put on it, it moves in and out great. You know, I would recommend putting maybe just a dab of grease in there every now and again. Take them apart and clean them. But yeah, if you're interested in any kind of wood turning and you're looking for a chuck, this may be one you want to give a whirl to. Right here, my next item. If you'll kind of excuse the mess, I keep a lot of extra sandpaper in behind here. But the main thing I wanted to show you was this benchtop belt sander and disc sander. Of course, I've got a Win bench grinder here too, although I wouldn't really say that that's necessarily a woodworking tool, because it just grinds stuff, sharpens stuff. Although I've got it set up here, even though this one's a little small, I've got this one set up to where I sharpen all my bowl gouges and that kind of stuff for wood turning. But the main thing I wanted to show you is this one. I use this quite a bit. It's got a belt sander on here that I use primarily. This does fine too, and you can see I've got some burning on here that I've used up on a previous project, getting a little too aggressive with it. This belt sander works great, and you can find these belts at just about any place that sells them. And this is a 4-inch by 36-inch belt sander. And this one you can take loose, stand it up if you're doing maybe a different type of project, but a lot of times I just keep this one down. It works great. It's a little noisy. And that would probably be my con on that one if you know I were to say anything bad about this one. Other than that, I love this thing. I should have made that investment a long time ago. Although I would love to have one of those oscillating spindle sanders, either in a wind or maybe even a rigid. But this one works great. And one good thing I'll say about this wind little bench grinder, if you've ever used them before, you know how noisy they can be. That one, in my opinion, is ultra quiet. If there was anything negative about that one, maybe it's just the size. You know, it's a 6-inch. I do wish I had an 8-inch grinder, but that's got nothing to do with that particular one. That one works good as well. Okay, so I'm down to my final two Wind brand tools here that I really like, and I left my two favorites for last. And first up, as you can see, and you've probably seen this in some of my previous videos if you've watched any of those. If not, check out my channel. But this Wind track saw, and as many will tell you, if they've got other brands, you know, Festool and that kind of stuff, it is not as expensive, so it's going to be missing some features. But for what I use a track saw for, 99.9% of the time, it's a straight, square, 90-degree cut, and I'm just breaking down large sheet material here, and for that, it works absolutely flawless. If I were to say anything negative about it, maybe it's just some slop in the adjustment here for your 90 degrees or 45 or whatever that might be, and it is mostly plastic. But otherwise it works great. And when I bought this one, I bought the PowerTech tracks, and Wind does make those as well, although the reason I got with these is these had really good reviews and I stuck with those. But I did go back and purchase the Wind brand clamps. Now that goes on underneath of that track, will hold it down to your work surface if you needed to. And depending on what it is, it does have rubber pieces on the back that keeps it from sliding around. Most of the time, if you're using on a piece of plywood, you don't even have to clamp them down. But it is a good kind of a backup in case you make a mislick and get the track off, and so you don't make a bad cut. But either way, these tools work great. So on to my final tool here, and this is another one. I've done a video on this one. It's a Wind dust collector. And first off, I want to say, before we go too far in it, the negative on this one is a pretty big negative, but it's not necessarily a flaw with the tool. It's this bag. You know, and when I first seen this thing, I thought it would be so handy to have one with a zipper. And don't get me wrong, that is a nice feature to be able to take this off, take it outside and dump it out. But after a while, the negative kicks in. This zipper doesn't want to hold the zipper closed. As you can see here, it is fully zipped, but it pulls apart. And the next thing is, because of the material of this, you can see all these wood chips that like to stick to that, and you could sit here for days pulling that off, and it's not going to look much better. Negatives out of the way. This, for the size, is an extremely powerful dust collector. Mainly, if you've seen my channel, I use it at my joiner, my planer, bandsaw some, even though it doesn't do the best there. But mainly I keep it over here. And so one thing I'm thinking about adding to this is your intake. Naturally, that is your exhaust, so that's where it spits the chips out. I'm thinking about adding a chute over here in my wall to where I can suck the chips from the planer and the joiner, and to add that chute to the wall so it spits it outside. That's where I put them anyway. I don't have neighbors close. I can use them as mulch. Not too concerned about that. So I'm thinking about adding that, but I'm not sure about the bandsaw, although that would be very easy to do over here. And I may even add in some type of, I've seen these guys that take a garbage can and kind of use that with a hose instead of this. But I definitely recommend something besides this bag. But the collector itself is great. So guys, I hope you found this video something informational in it, and if you're on the fence about getting some Wind tools, maybe give them a shot. If nothing else, I figure they'll last you a while. If they don't, suit your needs later on, maybe save up and get that more expensive tool, or do like some people say, buy once and cry once. That's up to you. But if you're like me on a budget, that's not always an option. So these wind tools may be just right up your alley. So anyway, that'll do it for this video. I appreciate you joining me, and we'll see you again on the next one.